So you may have heard the one about the two young fish going for a swim, as fish do. And they happened to meet an older fish swimming the other way. And the older fish says to the younger fish, "Morning, kids. How's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then one of them eventually turns to the other and looks at him and goes, "What the hell is water? What the hell is water?" And they live in it, they swim in it, it's inside of them, it surrounds them. Their life depends upon it, and yet they don't have a clue. They're ignorant of it. It's almost as if it's so close that it's invisible. One wonders if a fish would only realize what water is once a fish has been taken out of the water. And once they've been taken out of the water, then they'll realize their life depended on the water. And maybe they will not realize that until that happens. I remember when I was training to become a Methodist minister, I don't know, it was around about 1989, 1990, and us trainees spent a couple of days or a week in Soweto. And it was now the Sunday, our time in Soweto was coming to an end, and we finished in a church on the Sunday evening. And all us trainee clergy got together after the service in one of the back rooms kind of thing, and one of my white colleagues began to sing a hymn. And it was one of those hymns that have a common tune, that in other words can be sung in Afrikaans, can be sung in English, can be sung in isiXhosa, any one of the vernacular languages. So what happened was, by the second verse, my black colleagues had joined in the song, the hymn. They began to sing the same hymn, but in the vernacular. And because they were in the majority, and also because they had better voices, they dominated the hymn. And my colleague who started the hymn broke down crying before the end of it. And I remember she said these words: "For all the time that I've been here in Soweto, I have felt like I have been drowning. And I was just coming up for air in singing one of my favorite hymns. And what did you have to go and do? Take it over. And so you pushed me down again under the water." Well, our facilitator wouldn't let that go. I think we spent until 3 a.m. processing that. And it wasn't long before my black colleagues began to say, so you felt like you were drowning for a few days, huh? A few days in a context that was foreign to you. In fact, it was a context that people tried their darndest to speak your language. Well, welcome to our world. And it's a whole lot worse. It's not for a few days, it's permanent. And we speak other people's languages all the time. And when we don't speak those languages as you would like us to speak those languages, we're considered stupid. And I reflected on the many occasions during those few days that I felt stupid. I know in my mind I'm not stupid, but I felt stupid. I was missing things. Things were going on that I wasn't aware of. I wasn't sure of protocol always. Do I sit? Do I stand? I just smiled a lot. It's tiring. It's exhausting. And so I learnt then that some people's lives are lived partially out of the water all the time. And for those people, it is absolutely exhausting. You have to navigate life and gasp for breath. You're doing life on a shortage of oxygen. But myself, who lives predominantly in a world that I define, don't experience a shortage of breath at all. And so very soon, I forget that there may be people around me who are living with a shortage of breath. I live in a blissful ignorance. Now, if you're thinking, well, that was 1989, 1990. Not long ago, I worked in a business, and I would ask management how the race relations are. We've got a great team, Alan. Great team. Great team. Things are fine. I said, well, can we test it? You just hand out a little post-it, sticky post-it thing, and you say to the management team, just write down on the page whether you're black, whether you're white, whether you're a woman or man, and the fear factor working in this place. 0 is no fear, 10 is complete fear. Just give us one number. And you get back white men not having a fear factor over 2 at all, white woman not over 3 or 4, black woman not having a fear factor less than 8, all on the same team. And what makes it worse is that the team is, and the management is ignorant of the fear factor. Ignorant, blissful ignorance. So we ask, what the hell is water? We need to ask, what the hell is whiteness? What the hell is whiteness? It's invisible to me as a white person because it is what I've been brought up with. I live and move and have my being within it. It just is so much a part of me and around me that I find it very difficult to actually even see it. Yet my life, up until this point, has depended upon it, traded on it, benefited from it, beyond I could ever imagine. So you would be familiar, some of you I'm sure, of Peggy McIntosh and her insightful article so many years ago called The Invisible Knapsack, where she described white privilege as this kind of knapsack, haversack, bag full of special provisions for white people. Maps, visas, passports, codes to help white people navigate life. And so, as I understand, the dominant social system is white skin sensitive. The dominant social system operates like this giant scanner in society. But because it's white skin sensitive, it gives white skin a pass every time I walk through the scanner. So it never beeps. I never hear the scanner beep. In fact, I never hear the scanner beep to the point that I don't even know that there is a scanner, because it never beeps on me. In other words, this dominant social scanner doesn't see me as a threat, ever. Doesn't see me as trespassing, ever. There is no place I cannot go because of the color of my skin. It just never beeps, which makes me believe it doesn't exist. It gives me a sense of belonging. I belong. I belong. Wherever I go, I have a right to be there. Always lets me through. Now, obviously, to live life without the social scanner beeping gives one a freedom that I don't even know I've been given, because I can't even figure an alternative. With this freedom gives me this incredible confidence to go where the hell I want. I internalize that confidence. Very quickly it becomes entitlement and the currency of my life. Have you ever walked out of a store and the scanner beep? Huh? Get a bit red-faced, a little bit embarrassed. The next time we walk out of any store, there's a little bit of anxiety. Did they rub that thing enough so that the beeper doesn't go, isn't it? When the social scanner goes off on people, when it beeps people, it provokes an anxiety. That anxiety is internalized. All the time then there's a conversation that goes on. Am I welcome here? Do I belong here? That conversation I do not have. So, my skin color is this incredible asset. Protective. It's a protective armor. Protects me. It's the gift that keeps on giving. And what does it give me? The benefit of the doubt. Always the benefit of the doubt. I never have to worry that my skin color will work against me. So it's this invisible support, springboard. In other words, I swim not just in water that I'm ignorant of, I swim with the current. My skin color never works against me when I'm entering into a financial transaction. In other words, when I go to the bank, I am not having a conversation with myself at any level that they may in any way use my skin color against me for my request. I'm not having that conversation in my head. There may be other reasons, but that's not going to be one of them. I want to rent an apartment. Wherever I want to rent an apartment, I can be sure that the color of my skin is not going to work against me. It's a conversation I don't need to have. I can choose to go and eat where I like, and be entertained where I like, go to what beach I like. Never fearing that I will be excluded because of the color of my skin or mistreated. Because of the color of my skin, I am never asked to speak on behalf of other whites. Ever. I mean, we see this playing out with the frequent mass shootings in America. If you know, besides 9/11, the greatest acts of terror in America have been perpetrated by people who look just like me. I go there often, I'm never profiled. Now why? So you've got this dominant social system. The dominant social system that makes the laws, that controls the media, that basically writes the narrative. And so if you have a white male, let me get more specific, a white male Christian, the dominant social structure that writes the narrative predominantly fit that criteria themselves. Or if not them, are supported financially by those that do fit that criteria. And therefore, the reasoning goes like this. I see a white Christian man killing however many people. But I'm a white Christian man and I wouldn't do that. Therefore, I draw no conclusion from the person being white and Christian and a male at all. I look for other reasons. Why? Because I embody those reasons and they don't match for me. So we exclude them. We move on to other things. Mental illness. Lone wolf. But when the killer is somebody that I do not identify with, color, religion, then it's lazy and it's easy to begin to categorize. And that's why stereotypes develop. So, on a whole lot of areas, more than I am aware of, I benefit. I take it for granted. Somehow I have been taught a social shorthand in my upbringing that I've become proficient at. And I conduct my life speedily with this social shorthand. In the presence of others who negotiate social terror at the same time, of which I'm oblivious to. Doesn't even cross my mind. Listen to this poem. It says something about the invisibleness. The dams are low in the Cape, we are told, not to fill the swimming pool, not to water the garden, not to wash the car, not to take a bath. We've never had a swimming pool to fill, never had a garden to water, never had a car to wash, never had the privilege of taking a bath to soak away the aches and pains that flood our cups and bowls otherwise empty. Seems the dams have been low for us forever. Athol Williams from Lansdowne in Athlone. Speaks of two worlds. So, I'm ignorant, I'm blind, yet I benefit beyond my wildest dreams. And I'm in the presence of others who the very same system, they struggle to breathe. Jane Elliott, some of you may be aware of Jane Elliott. She, after Martin Luther King was killed, she was in a little town in Iowa, and she divided third graders, I think 8, 9-year-olds, in a classroom according to their eye color, blue eyes and brown eyes, and discriminated against the one on alternative days. And it became a foundation for her work, which she still does today. She defines white privilege as the following. She says, white privilege is the freedom to be totally ignorant about people different from us. And then 2, to deny our ignorance. Now, I've spoken a lot about the invisibility, blindness. But I want to suggest it's a paradox. I want to suggest that deep down within us, we know, and we're not ignorant. James Baldwin, that great thinker and writer, he said these words. He said, white people know nothing about black people. White people know nothing about black people, absolutely nothing, except one thing. And it's the only thing they need to know. White people know that they do not want to be black people. Jane Elliott sometimes begins her workshops by saying to the white people present, please stand if you would be happy to be treated as black people are treated. Please stand. And no white person ever stands. In other words, we're not ignorant, we're not blind, we know. Deep down we know. So I want to hold this paradox because there's a profound ignorance, there's a profound blindness. I've been trained and schooled. Everything about my life was making me more and more blind. But at a very profound level, I'm not ignorant at all. I know the truth. I'm just petrified of it. What do I do with that knowing? Now, here's the thing. James Baldwin knows that we know. And he knows that we know and then doesn't see action. And sees a moral emptiness. How is it that you can know and do nothing about it. To go on as if you do not know when you know. So on a Sunday, there's a couple who come out here on the street and been here a number of years. They park cars on a Sunday. The guy's 32 years old. I asked him once, tell me, is there anything you can do? He said, I can't do anything, he says. I park cars. Anyway, they had a baby. They had a little boy about 5 years ago. So from literally a few weeks, I see that child grow up every Sunday on the pavement outside. Till sometime last year, the kid's about 4 years old, and for some reason, I've got a tennis ball. So I throw the ball at the kid, and we start playing some soccer in the street outside. I last about 10 minutes, and then I give the kid the ball, and I say goodbye. And he swears at me, tells me about my mother. Little boy going off his head, swearing at me. 4-year-old. So I stop, I turn, I look at this kid, I think, what the hell? Like, what the hell have I done? And then the penny drops. I've walked past him for 4 years. There's a story about walking past someone in the Bible. I've seen him, but I haven't seen him. Because let me tell you the truth. If that kid was white, it wouldn't have taken me 4 years. Because in this country, that water of discrimination lives inside of me. Has damaged my eyes. That when I see people on the street, I don't really see human beings. But if they were white, you could be darn sure I would see them straight away for who they really are. Now here's the shame gets further. It took me one phone call, just one phone call, 5 minutes of my time to get the child into a preschool. Power, privilege, access, blindness, all rolled up in one. I had an auntie once, she went to New York. She came back, she knew I used to work with homeless people. So she said, you know, Alan, there's so many homeless people in New York. I said, really? We've got lots of homeless. No, I'm saying, Alan, there are lots of homeless people in New York. Well, it was the first time she saw homeless people because she saw white people. I'm telling you now that if the shacks between here and Somerset West on the highway were occupied by white people, that area would have been transformed years ago. So, it's an American thing, but it's all over. When people speak of Black Lives Matter, and others want to say, well, no, all lives matter. Of course, all lives matter, but the reason why people are saying Black Lives Matter is because the truth is they haven't damn well mattered. And the hypocrisy is unbelievable. You've got people who want to save the rhino. They have a meeting. No one stands up in that meeting and says, but what about the giraffes? They're not under threat. Now, there may be stages. Maybe my eyes are open to the people on the street. What do we say? Underprivileged. Yet I'm still very reluctant to speak about the overprivileged. Have you ever heard of the term overprivileged? Has it ever been a word that you've ever written down or spoken? It hardly exists because the dominant social structure determines the narrative, and the dominant structure is the overprivileged, and they write the word out of our vocabulary. So it's okay for me to speak about the underprivileged, but not okay for me to speak about the overprivileged. Especially when I begin to discover that there is a causal relationship between the overprivileged and the underprivileged. I can speak about the disadvantaged, but not the advantaged. People get very nervous about when you start speaking about the advantaged. So denial becomes quite a high thing on the agenda. So Kubler-Ross's stages of grief. This seems to be what some of us go through when we open our eyes to our privilege as white people. Denial, and then the stages of denial, then anger. People get hell of a angry very quickly. In bargaining, what happens if I got a black friend? I've adopted a black kid. But what we've spoken about has nothing to do with our attitudes or actions so far in the conversation. It's about a system, a current that helps us in the waters of life. And then it can lead to, damn, now what? Depression. The term white guilt comes up. Just now you'll be able to fill in a form to give some feedback, and someone last night said they heard a lot of white guilt. This is not white guilt speaking. Don't have to be guilty for being white. But guilt can be an extremely appropriate emotion when I discover undue benefits and how I've been ignorant of it and blind. Guilt is appropriate. It tells me that I'm alive to a morality, that I have a conscience that's quick to feel. Guilt, however, is not a healthy, sustainable emotion to determine our life. But it can be a very powerful emotion to get us to change and then to find other emotions to drive us. And then finally, there's an acceptance. Now, Kubler-Ross tells us that those stages are not in sequence. We visit them time and time again. We go round and round. Some of you may be aware of the Johari window in psychology, and I find it helpful, especially in discussions like this, because it tells us that there are kind of four segments of our life. There are areas of our life that are the known self, things we know about ourselves, and then there's the hidden self, things we know about ourselves that others do not know, the unknown self, things neither of us know about ourselves, and then there's also a little segment there that I may not know about myself that you know about. And that's profound. The moment we buy into that fourth segment, it's really a game changer. It's inviting us to be open to the fact that someone else may have an insight into my life that I don't have. And the moment I accept that fact, it invites me to be open and humble to learn and to be curious and to learn what others see that I may not see. Now, I haven't clarified my understanding of the term white and whiteness, so let me do that. I've spoken about my skin color. The term white, as I understand it, was invented. And you would think that such an invention would be known about, and the one who invented it would be known, and we would know the precise details of the invention and why it was invented. But I discovered that that's not often the case. So in case it's not known, at least according to my reading and research, the first time the concept of whiteness was used in history was in the 1600s, late 1600s. According to the work of Theodore Allen, whose thesis was entitled Class Struggle and the Origin of Racial Slavery. Not the origin of slavery, but the origin of racial slavery. And the little byline of the book was the invention of the white race, that he says that in the plantation areas in places like Virginia and Maryland, there was uprisings beginning to happen by both black and white, low-class slave labor. The European elite, who up until that point had only referred to themselves with European identity, tried the old theory of divide and conquer, said, well, what we need to do, we need to divide the opposition, because otherwise we're going to get taken out. There are many of them. So what we need to do is divide, and how are we going to divide? Well, let's divide according to color, and those who are white of European descent, you are different from them, we'll give you certain privileges and powers. And so they divided the working class, divided the opposition to the elite. And, as we know so well in this country, no matter how perverse it actually is when someone gives you privilege and power, doesn't matter how perverse the basis of that is, sometimes it's very difficult to resist the gift of privilege and power, as it was then. And so whiteness, the actual term was invented, and this is so crucial for us to hear. Its origin was to secure privilege and power. That was its origin, and that has been its perpetual purpose up until this day, to secure privilege and power for an elite. And so it's not a biological term, we know that. But it is filled with privilege and power. Why? Because those in power said it should be filled with privilege and power. So let me try and draw an analogy here. You know the phrase, the house always wins. The house always wins. Gambling. The house always wins. Gambling institutions make the rules of the house in their favor. They will always be in the favor of those who own the house. They've got to allow some winners, and whoever does win, they will publicize those winners tenfold to get the rest of us to think that we too can win, but we forget that the odds are against us. The tables are stacked in their favor. They make the rules. Who owns the house? The one with the biggest gun. The one who's prepared to do the most violence. Who doesn't discover continents but invades continents. That one owns the house, makes the rules of the house. Always in their favor. So let me ask you a question. If whiteness was an invention to secure privilege and power, what gives people power? What gives people power? Anything. Tell me. Okay? Money. What else? What gives people power? Education. What else? Gender. What else? Sorry? Birth. What else? Networks. There are a whole lot of things. Have a look here. I don't know if you can see that list, can you? Let me read it out to you. So we said where money gives people power, gender, sexism, racism, age, religion, sexuality, geographical location, education, gender, marital status, health, physical ability, employment, language. We can go on and on and on. Your physical stature, your looks, your clothing, your accent. A whole lot of things give us power. So now, you've got a list there of target and non-target. So if we're talking money gives power, who does money benefit and who's it against? The poor suffer when there's the power dynamic of money at play, and the rich benefit. So you can go down the list. Around sexism, women, predominant target of sexism, men the non-target. Racism, black are the target, white non-target. Ageism, a little depending on where, but the very young, the very old suffer. There's a kind of a median age of 30 to 55. That is the non-target. Religion, Christianity is the non-target. Anything other, Muslim, Islam, African traditional, depending on where you are, obviously. Sexuality, LGBTQI or straight. Geographical location, rural or urban. Education, you've got a matric, tertiary education. Transgender, cisgender. Marital status, divorce, single, married or non-target. Health, HIV positive is target, HIV negative. Physical ability, employment, language, take a moment to try and figure out how many times you are a target, just according to that list. There's some of us here who may not be a target at all. I've been in groups where people are targets 8, 9 times. I'm divorced. I'm a target there. It's a target that's an undercover target because you wouldn't know I was divorced or wouldn't care if I never told you. But I know what that target does to me every time I marry someone. Every time I stand over here and I say, and I repeat after me, till death do us part, it's like someone's taking a dagger and stabbing me through the heart. I feel like such a fraud, such a failure. In a society that no one really gives anymore. So I know what that one target does to me. Start multiplying the targets now. They're not of equal weight. In various contexts, they will weigh differently. Think for a moment, you're sitting here, in this place. You're sitting next to your lover, your partner, who's of the same gender. And you hear something that I say that touches you, and you want to touch them to let them know that you're touched, that you know, that they know, that you know. And you've got to have a conversation in your head. That straight people don't have to have. You don't have to have it, but the possibility of having it, that possibility doesn't exist for a straight person. In fact, if others had to see them touching, they would see it as endearing. Affirm it. So we start adding up. And then so my white skin that the scanner never beeps gets me access into a whole lot of places that enables me to make money. 70% of all management in this country still is white. And we know it's not just who you know, not just what you know, it's what you know about who you know these days. But it's the networking that enables doors to open. That I can trust that the skin color is not going to be held against me in my performance. And so doors start opening. So the color of my skin, my gender, my sexuality, my faith, even if they may not be helping me, they're definitely not hindering me. And then money. Now, it's like compound interest. Once you've got a bit of one of these non-targets, they add and they add and they add. But the whole is a whole lot more than the sum of the parts. But the opposite is equally true. Those people who are targets over and over again, it's like compound interest on their debt. And they're lugging it around. You know, when I was about 10 years old, I was riding on my bicycle on the pavement. And I would fly around the corner. And as I was going around the corner, this blind right-hand corner, I crashed into this elderly black man. And I started crying, and I was entangled in my bicycle. And this elderly black man began to bend down and kind of try and grab me with one hand here and try and grab the bicycle, but I wasn't kind of getting unhooked too easily. Because it was a corner, it was an intersection. And I remember there were people in their cars hooting with their windows down, shouting at him, saying, "What are you doing to that boy?" And I learned at 10 years old that I had more power than an adult African man. So the power here is just incredible. And then the weight thereof. These are some of the things now that are so profoundly painful that as a non-target, I internalize this confidence, entitlement, freedom. But so others who are targets can internalize all the negativity of being a target. And it plays itself out in the most innocent, inverted commas, of ways. So for example, I've got staff here, work with me, domestic worker, cleans. I say to her, "You know, I've got an open door policy, hey? You just come and see me anytime, anytime." I genuinely mean that. She ticks about 6 or 7 of those. For her to get into my office is like climbing Mount Everest. When you are the only person employed in a family, your fear factor of losing your job is exponential. I got 3 brothers. We all work. We all started work when we wanted to start work. We've never been unemployed. And when we stop work, it will be on our terms. That's unbelievable. There are not many families in this country that could say that. Meaning I don't have to worry about educating my brother's children. Now here's one definition of racism. I find it the most honest definition, so I use it. But there are other definitions. That racism or sexism or any ism is whatever the prejudice is, so prejudice around the color of one's skin, plus power to act on that prejudice. And this is important because sometimes in these discussions in this country, you'll hear black people saying, "I can't be racist. You invented this blimmin' stuff. We didn't. We can't be racist." That doesn't mean a black person can't be prejudiced. What is prejudice? I prejudge you. I think you're an idiot before I know you. It's prejudice. Anyone can have that thought. What makes you a racist is whether you have the power to act on your prejudice. No power, no racism. Prejudice, yes. You can stew it in your own head, but you can't do anything about it. So it comes down to those of us who have power, and that comes back to that. Those of us who have power have a much higher propensity, and not just propensity, but possibility, and not just probability, I should say, of being racist. I mean, it's, no, I mean, they're limit. I mean, let's go to Johannesburg, gated community. Imagine sitting on they're always broken flippin' chairs. They're always broken chairs. Sitting on a broken chair, having to lift up a barricade for people to drive in and out in their motor vehicles. Imagine doing that for a job. So you're sitting there, and this car comes up pretty quickly. So you realize the driver's in a hurry. So what do? Huh? You get up slowly. But now it's touch and go. If you don't open the boom, you lose your job. Fear factor, redlining, no way it's going to happen. But you figured out how fast you can do it to annoy the driver, but without losing your job. That's the only power that person has, is to maybe take a minute out of your schedule. It's the only power they have. They take too long. You're phoning that number, you're dialing that number, they may lose their job. So yes, everyone can be prejudiced. And they can use their minute, minuscule measurements of power to irritate a minute out of your life. But I can totally drown that entire family. And they know it when they lose their job. So, prejudice plus power. Now you may say, well, my immediate boss is black. The one on my boss, above my boss, is a black woman. So they've got power. Well, they've got some power. But it's like little triangles within triangles within triangles, that the overall system is still a system that doesn't beep for white skin. But the overwhelming majority of corporate South Africa is still white-owned, white-funded, white money, white capital, white interests. And therefore, my immediate boss may be black, she may be a woman, she may have a little bit of power in some, area, but I can leapfrog her. Let me tell you how this happens. Sometimes it happens very innocently. So, Friday night drinks, end of the week, Friday night drinks. And my boss, my immediate boss, who's a black woman, is there. Her boss is there, also black. But then there's the CEO, top management, shareholders. They're also there. And they're pouring a drink and they're talking about the Springboks and New Zealand playing rugby, right? And they're talking about how the game's going to turn out. And I've just been there a few months, I'm a junior, a few months. And I turn around and I say to the CEO, you're talking crap. It's not going to happen that way. It's not going to happen that way. It's going to happen this way. Let me tell you why. And I have a conversation. Why? Because I know rugby. And I know he knows rugby. And I have this conversation that I can have, that my boss cannot have, and my boss's boss dare not have. Now, it's these sorts of things that we swim in the same pool. We both went to the same university, maybe. We have similar interests. Now, you imagine you are my direct boss seeing me joking around happily with the CEO, and you've got a disciplinary thing that you want to deal with me tomorrow about. What does that do to you? These dynamics play out in the most hidden ways, and sometimes innocent ways, but sometimes not so innocent. So, power and privilege and how it accumulates itself. Let me use a further example of just what I've benefited as a white South African. So I was born in 1968. In 1966, That was the funding model of the government in education in this country. So for every white child was sponsored to the tune of 74 Rand 30. Every black child was sponsored 2 Rand 39. Coloured 17 Rand 71, Indian 26 Rand 83. That was the funding model, the government funding model. Therefore, my education that I received was almost free from the government. I went to a great school, a government school, that was almost free. For me to get the same quality education as I did then, now, would be in a private institution, costing thousands and thousands that my parents would never have been able to afford. Now there are effects. That's 1966. So Professor Murray Leibbrandt says, let's reduce South Africa to 100 people in decimals of 10. And let's see in 1993 and 2008 the income. Especially let's compare the lowest 10% and the highest 10%. And this is what it equals. For every 20 cents that the poorest 10% of this population gets, for every 20 cents, the richest 10% get just over 50 Rand. You times that by 5 to get it to a Rand. For every Rand, the richest 10% get 255 Rand. I let rands drop through my car seat onto the ground. I don't even bother about 20 cents. But I sure as hell bother about 50 Rand. Let's make it to a grant, 1,200 Rand there. For every 1,200 Rand that the poorest 10% of this country receives, the wealthiest 10% get 261,000. Look what that graph looks like. Look what that graph looks like. What you invest in education, 40 years, 50 years later, you will reap in your economy. Direct correlation. Causal link. Now, the education system that we have today, we have to ask ourselves, is it a system of education that favors the non-target groups? Of course it is. In fact, it enhances all the targets by putting greater pressure on them. So the very education syllabus enhances all of that. The media perpetuate that. Religion perpetuates that. The law perpetuates it. And so the rules of the house struggle to ever change. So, I've said a couple of things. One, white privilege is about a system, a social system that doesn't beep white people. It gives us a free ride. The scanner. That system needs to be addressed. And that is the work of justice, working out what does it mean to be just? What does justice look like? What does it mean to live, to do to others as you want them to do to you, systemically? It's not about my thoughts, it's not about my deeds, about anything like that. It's about a system that we have to deconstruct. Now to do that, I've got to cut the branch that I'm sitting on, by and large. Because it means I've got to expose all my benefits and limit them. Now, who would want to cut the branch that they're sitting on? I want other branches to grow, but I don't want to cut my branch. Well, my word tonight is very clear that unless we prune the tree so that the whole tree can flourish, the tree will die. It's coming down. There is no way that inequality can continue to exist. And there is no way it should continue to exist. And unless it is deconstructed willingly, voluntarily, it will be deconstructed violently. And that's what we see. You know the analogy. The house is burning, so people break the windows to get out of the house. Do you know what people like me complain about? They broke the flippin' windows. That's what we complain about. But they're living in a house that is burning them to death. And they know that we know. And then when we have sometimes discussions like this, there's a certain level of anger that arises. And then sometimes the response is, chill. But when your house is burning, that would be highly abnormal to do that. So there's a system and it's a work of justice. The other is our attitudes. And this is the hidden conversations that I have in my own mind. Let me give you 3 examples that have happened to me over my life. I can go into a bank. I'm going to do a transaction that's not the normal transaction. So as I'm walking into the bank, I scan the tellers. There are 3 black, 1 white, 1 Indian. And I begin to pray. White, someone at least can understand me. Indian, Indians are pretty good with money. Yeah? I have this conversation in my head. They don't know I'm having the conversation, but I have it in my head. And then I get to the black woman teller. And she serves me politely and efficiently. And I leave thinking, oh, things are improving. Some of you live in neighborhoods and you're on neighborhood watch WhatsApp groups. Brava male walking down the street. Charlie male walking down the street. There are 3 of them. When I walk down the street of Khayelitsha, no one is messaging whiskey male walking down our street. No one. And when I walk down the street of your neighborhood, you are not messaging whiskey male walking down our street. Get off those things. Get off them. Change them. But they are racist. You go to the beach. The beach is full, very full. I ask you, how was it? You say, sure, next time let's get there earlier. It was really full. It was pumping, man. The next time you go there, it's filled with black people. How was the beach? Now, things have changed, huh? Different framing. Different framing. These are the subtleties. It doesn't mean you're going to tie a black person behind your bakkie and drive them around your farm. It doesn't mean you're going to do that. But it's the thoughts that play itself out in Alpha, Bravo, Charlie language that we think smart. So it's our attitudes, it's our actions, but it's also our systems. So let me close by saying this, that if we're going to change, there seems to me that there are always 3 kind of stages of and forgive the religious language, it's kind of the only paintbrushes I have. But the one is conviction, that if you're not convicted that there is a problem, that the way things are is not the way things should be, we're never going to change. So we have to come to that place of conviction that the way things are not the way things should be. And then conversion, what is the alternative? We need to have a vision of what is just. What is just? And then we need to work out contrition. How do we work? How do we get from where we are to where we should be? And that's crucial because, you know, when you go into a mall and you got to find a place, you go to that map, and what's highlighted on the map? You are here. Why? Because they realize that before, it will be meaningless if you know that Checkers is on the ground floor in the left-hand corner if you don't know where you are. We have to become honest about where we are. If I'm not honest about where I am, I can follow directions and never reach the destination because I started in a place that I didn't know I was. So conviction and conversion and contrition. Now, I know some of you are from schools here. And one of the issues over the last while has been around hair. And white people have framed this around, they framed it as a discipline issue, when black people have framed it as a dignity issue. And dignity trumps discipline. Making sure that black people always feel that they have to become white in order to belong. So, Steve Biko, I mean, can you believe it? 30 years old? 30 years old, and you're so wise at 30 years old. The problem is white racism, and it rests squarely on the laps of the white society. White liberals must leave blacks to take care of their own business while they concern themselves with the real evil in our society, white racism. So let me end there and remind you that this is an introduction.